negotiations is just this ongoing learning process. And it really, like almost everything is a negotiation. I just barely had this conversation at a gig I was doing. And I said everything is a negotiation. And somebody's like, well, not when there's power dynamics, because sometimes people can tell you what to do. And in the short run, that is true. Sometimes your boss can just tell you what to do. And sometimes as a boss, you're just going to tell somebody what to do. But that is oftentimes actually just a long negotiation where you're looking for your opportunity to plant your idea and it may get shot down and then more data may come in and then you may be able to be like, hey, I know you weren't interested the first time, but would you be willing to revisit that? And so sometimes even with the power dynamics and a boss who is more maybe in the moment, not necessarily perpetually, but more in the moment, sometimes it winds up actually being just a very long form of negotiation. So virtually everything is a negotiation. We just don't call it that because people don't like negotiation because it sounds like it's conflict. And in a way it is because you're trying to get somebody to do something that you want. And sometimes they're more on board than other times. So with that, Jen, why don't you share one of your favorite negotiation experiences? It can either be personal or work. And then we'll sit there and we'll kind of peel out what we think the lessons are.
One of my, well, it's a lesson learned. It involves you actually. So, like Cindi said, you know, the class that she taught at Southeastern that I took over. And so before she left, I remember we having this conversation and I was negotiating for a new position. And I was reaching out to all of my mentors and Cindi was one of them. And we talked about, you know, in this industry or academia, the salary is set in negotiating. Sometimes it's other stuff. It's not necessarily the number. And Cindi said, well, try anyway. And I talked myself out of it and believed that there was no room to negotiate. And if I negotiate, it will make myself look bad. And it may make me appear, you know, in a certain way. And so I decided against it. And then years later, I found out that someone else who got the same position at the same time, came into the institution at the same time as I did, negotiated and got more. And we had the same exact credentials, same amount of experience. And so it was a big lesson learned. And to this day, I tell my students, even if you think there's no point in negotiating, try anyway.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's dig a little bit deeper into that. So it's legitimate that you're worried because there are stories where somebody asks for more and gets shot down. And so it is really important that you consider like the context in which you're asking. You know, you get pretty much one shot to ask. So if you've asked and they've come back and they've negotiated on your behalf and then you're like, hey, how about more? You know, on the same issue. Now they might come back and be like, hey, we can't give you that salary. And then you can come back and say, okay, I understand. You know, would you be willing to consider giving me this X, this other thing? Like in some organizations, it might be more time off. And so you can do that. But like if you ask somebody about pay, they go negotiate for you, and then they come back and they're like, no, I can't do that. You know, you're gonna irritate them if you say, hey, go back and ask for more pay. You know, for presumably less. But once they go and they talk to somebody else, then you kind of have to see what comes back, and you can do a different dimension potentially, but you can't go back on the same dimension. And even a different dimension, you really want to try to negotiate that all in that one conversation. That if somebody keeps going back to a third party, it means they're not the decision maker, and it means that you really need to get in front of the decision maker. because we should be able to have that conversation where it's like, okay, you can't do that pay, but could you give me this amount of days off instead, all in one sitting? And so you're negotiating a whole package. That's, I think one of the key lessons. What do you think?
Make judgments. So that's the really hard part. My students will always ask, okay, well, you're saying that, always try anyway, but then you also say that sometimes, you're risking souring relationships. So don't ask for too high of a starting number. So it's just a judgment call, and it's hard to teach that. It's experience. It's learning from feedback to increase accuracy. Although I do have this example, this person, he knows an insider when he is applying for this job. He knows exactly what the range is going to be. But when after the interview, they sat down and negotiate a salary, he asked for something that is way over the range. And immediately, that was just immediate turned off, and he ended up not getting hired.
Even though he was the favorite inside.
Right. He was the favorite, right. And he made a mistake.
That is a mistake, but what I find to be really helpful is the external, like if you have external data, like that guy, he knew the range. He could have justified why he should be top of the range. And he might have even been able to justify going a little bit above the range if he had communicated it just to try.
Right.
Right. But you gotta respect, like you're using the range as the anchor. To me, the key in trying to figure out what you're going to ask for is having the external data or the internal data if you can get your hands on it. And people are okay with that. To use that as the justification for what you're asking for when you're asking to try to get more money. And so like, that's what is it that Yuri calls it? Objective criteria. Basically, that you're not saying I'm worth this. You're saying this is what this external source says, my skill set, my experience, and again, like there is a little bit of art to it because you have to sit there and go, here's what the external says I'm worth, and this is why I think I'm on the higher end or above that.
Right. You have to offer the justification.
Right. So I think that's a lesson. I also think there's a lesson in there about being a female negotiator, right? So we know that women are less likely to negotiate, although the MBA schools have, like the recent studies on that have evened it out because they've been getting negotiation classes. And so now, like the original studies were basically MBA women were like far less, I can't remember the exact numbers, but far less likely to negotiate than their male counterparts, to like a huge detriment to their salary, especially 10 years down the line. And so there's been an emphasis on sort of bringing the women MBA students up to par. So they're negotiating. So there is a training effect that happens, but there still is sort of like a cultural expectation, I think, that women won't negotiate and we can look more aggressive when we're negotiating. And it's almost like a vicious cycle. So again, the stories that we've heard in academia about people who have negotiated, it's almost always been women who had the rug pulled from them. I've never heard, have you ever heard of a man having the rug pulled from them for negotiating? I mean, negotiating aggressively, like your story is one thing, but just asking, like, is there more? Usually that's okay, but I do think you do have to sort of, because there is that sort of cultural component to it that we still haven't totally burst. You need to ask, but you need to ask carefully, where you're like, hey, I really want this job. Is there any way that you could get me more money though? Where it's like, I wanted this job, but like, if you could get me more money, that would just really help me justify taking this particular position. And again, like you have to have an external criteria that you're pegging it to. Like, you know, this would be very helpful for, you know, me sort of being stable. And this is kind of what I was expecting.
Yeah. Yeah. That social expectation for women, right? We are, we're supposed to be the caring character. We're sweet, right? And a lot of people, it resonated with me a lot when I read this, that women tend to feel that they say to themselves, I'll negotiate after I prove myself. And so I'm not going to negotiate now. I have to prove myself first.
And that falls into even the job search. Like it's one piece of data that stands out to me is men apply for jobs that they're not quite qualified for, and women apply for jobs that they're completely qualified for. And again, that has an impact on your long-term earning potential because they're starting at a higher level.